Hi guys, it's me again, and today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite AAA gaming. We're going to look at where it's been, why it exists right now, and where I think it's going, which is going to be the majority of them into the garbage. I've said this before, that if you build 100 bridges and you suck one dick, you're not a bridge builder, you're a dick sucker. But if you suck 100 dicks and you only build one bridge, you're Ubisoft. And the problem now is that we've got a lot of companies like that because they focus so much on trying to make these games and focusing on making them the most broad audience possible, making them have everything for everyone, that we get to a situation where one size fits none. And I think this has been an ongoing issue. It's been going on, I think, especially in the last 10 years. I think COVID accelerated the goal with this because of how much more money gaming is making now. COVID was kind of like a multiplier effect on that, but it's been going on for a while, and I want to explain kind of where AAA gaming came from, because back in the day, we're talking about the 90s, even the 80s, right, with arcades and the original consoles, but the 90s and the 2000s and a little bit into the 2010s, right, and not all the way, as we all know, is that AAA gaming was a stamp of approval, a seal of quality, and it's funny now because it's almost the opposite. It's like, well, this is a AAA game. It's coming from this big studio, so we know that it's going to have a number of annoying features. There's probably going to be, you buy the game on Steam, and then you have to log on to their additional launcher in order to actually play it. All of these very, very annoying things. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people don't enjoy that. And the other big issue that AAA gaming has is that basically a lot of studios, and I think companies are doing this in general, this is something I think that we're also seeing in movies as well, where you're seeing these movies that are being made with these gigantic budgets, like everything is CGI, there's all these A-list actors in it, and the movie has a budget of over $100 million maybe, or something like that. I don't know really what average movie budgets are, but it's probably even more than that in some cases, and then it makes back a fraction of that money, and the reason what that does is it makes it to where every single movie has to be Spider-Man. Every single movie has to be attached to an IP that can be attached to a line of toys that can be sold to kids. And so now you don't get as many movies that take risks as much because those risks cost more money, and it's harder to recoup the money back from the risks because you've lost the market of DVDs. And so this has been going on now for quite a while with movies, and I think video games now are starting to copy the trend. And what you're seeing now is that everything is everything is the next one of something that already previously existed. And of course, I say this, and if you guys can see what I'm playing playing Path of Exile 2, okay? So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but that is kind of what my point is that I think that studios like Grinding Gear Games, studios like Warhorse that are making Kingdom Come Deliverance, and other studios that are the more AA quality studios, I think that the real future is going to be those studios making the AAA games. It's instead of a AAA publisher or a AAA developer making multiple AAA games, it's going to be one AA publisher, one AA studio making one AAA game. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot more. And I think that whenever you really look at, because especially live service games, you have to have such a finger on the pulse of the actual community of the game. You have to have everybody that's working there really understand it. I think that's what Blizzard had back in the 2000s with Warcraft. And if you look at any of the most popular video game franchises, and you look at the people that make the games are usually very good at those games. For example, the Final Fantasy 16 guy that went and one-shot the boss in front of a big audience before the game came out. That was really cool. And it showed that, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. He actually knows how to play his own game, which in some cases, like Diablo 4, turned out to not necessarily be the case. And so anyway, what I think has happened is that you've seen these studios like Ubisoft. I think Ubisoft is it's the worst offender, where they're spending $100 million on a game and they're expecting a 20% return. Because would you rather have 20% on $10 million or 20% on $100 million, right? And so that's the logic that they use, that they're going to just spend more money so they can multiply the largest amount of money possible. And I think that what's happening now is that is true, but it's also that you double down on a loss when it's not. And I think that's really the situation that we're seeing a lot of these studios run into when they release a game that's effectively a dud. And I think the reason why these games are getting released and they're trash is because consumer interests are changing so much faster than they used to. So think about it like this. There are a lot of games that are in development for, I don't know, like 6 years, for example. 6 years or 4 years in development is very, very common. Think about how much different things were 4 years ago. Well, 4 years ago, we had COVID. Everything was totally different. People were addicted to Genshin Impact, and everybody was spending all day on the internet. Well, you can't necessarily develop a game around that, that context. And 6 years ago, if you started making a game, well, if you just got inspired by Fortnite, man, you're a little bit late now, aren't you? And so what we're seeing now is that we're seeing smaller studios, these AA studios. I think the best example of this, too, that you can use besides grinding gear games is Larian, who made Baldur's Gate 3, is that Baldur's Gate 3 took an incredibly long time to make, but it didn't follow any trends because it didn't need to. There were no, outside pressures, outside investors. Being a publicly traded company was not causing them to have to, monetize the game in a way that was annoying. It was just them making a good game and then delivering it to players. And I think AAA game studios have, instead of becoming, too big to fail, they've become too big to succeed. And I've said this before, and I think that it becomes increasingly more true every year. And you're seeing these massive studios laying off. I didn't even know this. Ubisoft has 20,000 employees. How do you do that? There are so many people that work probably at these studios that have jobs that are, not particularly super involved with the actual creation of the product. And I think that's very obvious considering that they fire bunches of people and the products keep being made. So the issue is that you have a massive overstaffing, and then you have massive budgets, and then you have massive expectations and a priority system that's created by people who don't actually have the player's interests in mind. And what I'm saying by that is, I think a good example of this is if you look at a lot of the, video games that have, actors in them. I think Senua's Saga 2 is a really great example of a game that is made for an audience of gamers that doesn't really exist. So obviously the game was popular for some people, and there were a good number of people that bought and played the game, but the reality is that it really wasn't that big, and they probably didn't recoup their costs. And what happens is that games journalists and games media, and I think just the games industry itself, likes to gas itself up about these types of games, but I don't actually think that these are the types of things that players are actually looking for. And I think that's reflected in the sales, and this happens over and over and over. People play video games because they like playing video games. While there are exceptions, they are very few and far between. And so what's happened is that these studios have convinced themselves they need to do all these things that players don't really care about, and they do them at the expense of the things that players do really care about, which is replayability, actual play, playing the experience you have playing the game in the minute-to-minute basis. And I think that really another great example of this, I've been playing on top of Path of Exile 2, I've also been playing off-stream Stalker 2. And holy shit, that game is great. And it's made by, again, a AA, a smaller studio, but they've come together to really make an incredible game. And I think having a a focus. I remember, there was a really good metaphor that in Game of Thrones, King Robert was what's stronger, 5 armies or 1 army? And really it's the 1 army that's a lot stronger. And I think that's what we're starting to see a lot more with these games, is you're seeing these studios that are focusing entirely on making one defined product for a defined audience that they have a finger on the pulse of, and they're able to deliver a product to them that meets their needs and exceeds them in a lot of cases. That is the future for games. And I think also what's going to make this even more the future is the fact that you're going to see a lot of these studios, the layoffs are going to keep happening. And the reason why is because of different types of ways that you can effectively, it's not really all AI, but in some cases it is. If you can have one person do the job of 3 people through some sort of procedural generation or some form of technology, well, then you're going to have that happen. And as that happens, it becomes easier and it lowers that bar to entry for the quality that people expect whenever they're paying $70 or $60 for a video game. And so that's where I think AAA gaming is going to go. I think AAA gaming is going to have to become I don't know, they're going to have to scale down. And I feel like there are a few exceptions, right? We're always going to have Rockstar, From Software, Capcom, stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. But I think that many of these other studios are probably going to have to narrow down on one or maybe just a couple of IPs and then develop products for just those IPs rather than trying to release a bunch of different products and just like, well, if we sell 1 million of them for $10, we're going to make $10 million. Well, wow, why don't we sell 1 million of them at $1 million or something like that, right? Some variation of this. And it's just like the idea that, well, we can just keep making more money because there's no sense of market saturation. Well, I think that there's very clearly been a market saturation, hasn't there? And we're seeing that, express itself right now as, you see a lot of games that just don't have the marketing. There's just so much of an economy of attention. There's only so many people that can pay attention to so many games. And I think, again, when you have like your story game or whatever that is focused on, motion capturing facial movements, that just doesn't fucking matter to a lot of people. Like, I don't give a shit about that. I don't think a lot of people do. It's nice when the games have it, but I'm certainly not going to play a game because of it. But if a game has good gameplay, I will play a game because of it, even if the face models go like this. I don't give a shit. And I don't think most other people do either, except for other journalists and people in the industry. So what we're going to see more of is we're going to see these AA studios that, and I think that another reason why this is happening too is like distribution and publishing. Being able to publish a game, think about how many hoops you had to jump through in order to get your game on Nintendo 64, or in order to get your game on Super Nintendo, or even something like the GameCube. It was much harder to do than now, where all you have to do is, put your game out on Steam and then, post it on Baldi's subreddit. And if the people like it, maybe he'll watch it. And then it'll be in a YouTube clip. It'll get 100,000 views or more. And so that's pretty easy to do, right? Especially compared to, trying to work around, a Japanese company's expectations in the year 2003. Much, much harder to do. And so nowadays, I think you're seeing much more people able to get into that space and grow in that space much more quickly. And that's why you're going to see those AA studios that focus and narrow in on just like that one solid, really good product. That is where I think the future is going to be for AAA games. And I think that also AAA studios, this is another big problem, is that, what I was saying before with Ubisoft, they've sucked a lot of dicks. And the problem now is that residual taste in people's... let's go ahead and just stop right there. People think that their next games are going to be bad because their previous games have been bad. And so there is a reputational damage that happens that exists beyond the lifespan of the game that has problems. And that's effectively what I'm trying to say. And so what I think that we're seeing with Ubisoft and other studios is that they have this reputational damage, this generational reputational damage. Blizzard's another great example of this. And it makes it to where every game that they release is taken with such a massive grain of salt that a lot of people write it off before it even releases. They don't even know what it is. Oh, it's a Blizzard game. It's a Ubisoft game. It's EA. Of course it's going to be garbage. And so newer studios that focus on one product don't necessarily have that reputation, or at least in a lot of cases they don't. And if they do, they go out of business, right? And I think that's what happens in some cases. But that's where I think the future is of AAA gaming. I think that they have to narrow down and focus more on a number of individual IPs rather than trying to just get a 20% return on as many things as possible. I think that there is very clearly a market saturation. There's very clearly a market cap. And I think that we're beginning to explore that reality now. And I think that's become evident after about, I'd say 2022, after like the COVID level of like internet usage and video game usage kind of went back down. And then also it wasn't recovering at the 20% or 10% year over year expectations that a lot of tech companies were, getting investments in, under the expectation of. And so what I think is going to happen is, you're going to have a lot of these AAA studios that just simply can't meet the expectations of such a massive ship. It's like, how easy is it to turn a Titanic versus a Viking longboat, right? And that's why you see small games like Valheim doing a whole lot better than big games like Skull and Bones. And there it is, a quadruple A game, 1A for each player. And so that's what happens. That's where I think things are going to go. And I think the future that we're really going to see is going to be in the indie studios and the AA studios that focus in and fixate on creating one AAA high quality experience game. Like Path of Exile 2, Stalker 2, Baldur's Gate 3, stuff like that. And I think that's going to be the future of games. And you know what I think? I think that is such a good thing. That is an amazing, great thing, because those studios have a much better understanding of what the players want, and I'm a player, and that's what I want. So yeah, that's about it, guys. I thought I'd make this video and talk about this topic, because I see a lot of people bringing it up very regularly, and I wanted to give my 2 cents. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.